plus SMEs representing various aspects of Singapore as we start this webinar. I'm just going to share the initial number on what we have, and then we will go ahead with the webinar as more people join. So currently I'm seeing about 62 people logging into this webinar. So welcome guys, welcome to Isentia and RHB's Adapt and Respond webinar for SMEs. And today's topic will be something that has been the talk of the town and has been the talk of the town for multiple reasons. SMEs, which are about 220,000 of them in Singapore, and a large definition of what an SME is. We also look at the various sectors which we belong to and how much contribution they have to the economy of Singapore. Whether you're talking about generating 65% of our jobs or 50% or $200+ billion annually. So these SMEs have been in uncertain times because of COVID-19. And as we went into circuit breaker and also as we went into the various phases of budgets that the government rolled out, the SMEs have been provided support, and they also have questions which we would love to address and also discuss with the esteemed panelists as we go in this webinar. So SMEs will be the big focus for the next 1 hour. Today, I have with me Shekhar and Daniel joining us from RHB Bank, Juliana coming in from NTUC Foodfare, and Candice from ShopBack. My name is Prashant and I lead Insights for Isentia. All right, so over the next 1 hour, we are going to talk about the panelists and how they see SME ecosystem evolving in Singapore in these times, which sectors are impacted and which sectors may get impacted in future. We see that quite a lot, especially because of the unfortunate rise of foreign construction workers and how these numbers have actually impacted a lot of SME employers as they figure out the 3 C's as the DPM says, the cost, the crisis that they have, as well as the credit that they need to figure out. The second part of this webinar will be about reacting to trend spotting insights based on SME conversations. These conversations are happening on social media as we speak, and what Isentia did was looked at trend spotting insights, social media analytics on those conversations, but also looking into what are SMEs searching around. And we looked at search media data. We combined that with social media to share with you guys what SMEs are talking about. And the last one would be all about you. It will be about the questions from the audience, which panelists would love to take in as we adapt and respond, not only during the circuit breaker, but also as we return to the new normal. So welcome again, Shekhar, Daniel, Juliana, and Candice. We would love to hear more from you about your roles, and then we will get into the Q&A mode. Over to you guys.
Hey, hi Prashant, hi everyone. This is Shekhar here. I head the Equity Research Department for RHB Securities, part of the larger RHB banking group from Malaysia. Been in the industry in finance for about more than a decade, close to about a decade and a half. I've been working with corporates and with investors in Singapore for almost about 7-8 years, trying to engage them, trying to see how corporates, I've seen corporates move from SMEs to mid caps to large caps. I've seen business owners transform businesses. I've seen some business owners failing as well. But over the journey of about 7-8 years in Singapore with working with corporates and investors, there has been a good number of successes that I've seen. Probably an opportunity for me to discuss with you those business cases, or probably even those who probably failed, as an example of what should or should not be done.
Thank you, Shekhar. Daniel?
Essentially, I'm running the retail SME in RHB. That is basically the branches and also the SME team handling the companies. So we've turned over less than 20 million. I've been commercial lending my whole life since graduation. So for 20 years, I've been with various banks, but particularly in this sector, managing both the loans as well as the deposit in this sector of the banks. Well, I think over the years, we have witnessed various crises. Well, I think this is one, probably the worst I've seen. Happy to be here. Thanks, Isentia. Glad to hear more with the rest of the panel, and also from the SMEs as well.
Thank you, Daniel. We move into Juliana.
Hi everyone, I'm Juliana. I'm from NTUC Foodfare. I currently head the Enterprise Growth Business Development. For a good part of my career, I head marketing, branding, and communications for a good 15 years. Before this role, I also head the transformation, development, and innovation for Foodfare. So I hope today my insights that I do bring in comes from the various industries that I've been in, as well as the various roles that I've played in doing strategies, branding, as well as other insights in terms of research that I do provide for my company as well. Yeah, so I hope the sharing session will be useful. And I have lived through the various crises, from the Asian crisis in 1998. And now, as what Daniel has mentioned, this is really very different in the sense that it affects everybody. It's not just a particular industry or company. So the only difference, if I do see, is that there's a greater collaboration and as well as a get together by everybody in ensuring everybody's out of this well. So I think that's something very different this time. Yeah.
Thank you, Juliana. We move to Candice.
Afternoon, everyone. I'm Candice from ShopBack. I did not live through or go through the 1998 crisis in work, but in the 2008 crisis, I was also on Wall Street during that time, during the very difficult time. So this crisis in 2020 hits close to home, in the sense that right now I'm in Singapore, in Southeast Asia, and I think globally we are feeling the pain. Just to share a little bit about ShopBack as well, ShopBack is a discovery as well as rewards platform. I think during this time, a lot of consumers are looking for value. Thereby, I think we are offering good reason for users to use us. We are also a by performance platform, and thereby in terms of marketing solutions to corporates, to SMEs, to small businesses, we also offer good solutions there because you only pay by performance. And given that ShopBack operates across 9 regions, also hope to share learnings that might be relevant for Singapore for observations across different markets as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Candice. So we have some really good experience around the panel, right from looking into various markets, living through various setbacks commercially, learning from it, as well as seeing the journeys of SMEs as they either blossom or they pivot or they fold. So we would be starting up with your general outlook in these times among SMEs on how you see it. Any frameworks, any thoughts is more than welcome. Which sectors do you think are being impacted right now? We have the obvious ones and also the ones which are more invisible in nature, as well as the ones that you see impacted in future. So now we open up the discussion and we can free roll from here. Anyone can go first.
Okay, great. So, the sense I have here is it has only started to get worse. The obvious sectors that we know of is F&B, tourism related, travel, any other related sectors would be impacted. But the idea here is over the next year or so, there will be other small subsectors or other sectors in the SME space which will see significant impact. The impact may not necessarily be negative, so don't use the word connotation impact means bad. The impact would also be positive in nature, which means this will give opportunity for SMEs to transform. Probably a good test of seeing how many of them are fit to survive. The lousy ones are pretty much expected to fold. But the expectation here is this is a long-term process. Unlike the previous crisis of global financial crisis, this is not going to be a V-shaped recovery. You will have to put your foot down, try to figure out how long can you sustain, whether your business model is something that will evolve or you're just stuck with where you are right now. This transformation is the one that I'm looking forward to. In terms of sector specific, obviously we are seeing changes in the F&B space, rapid adoption of e-commerce. It's not a very big percentage of Singapore's overall retail market, but it's growing quite rapidly. Tours and travel is one business where we see long-term dampening effect. Even when we have a vaccine for COVID-19, I'm not sure how many people will be comfortable taking a chance to travel. Obviously, people would want to wait and see whether things improve globally, because this is not just impacting Singapore alone or just ASEAN alone. It's pretty much a global phenomenon. Sectors where I think the impact would be slightly delayed, one of them would be manufacturing. Short term, we may not see it because again, government support. We are still running through most of the operations, trying to ensure workforce or labor is there. But on the longer term, automation will have to creep in. I mean, the idea of trying to push productivity in Singapore's SME has been an effort that government has been taking for quite some time now. Hasn't really paid off, but I think this crisis will just speed up the whole process. So productivity is where the changes will come through across multiple sectors.
For myself, I think that would be retail, the F&B, especially those with large retail space, the events company. The obvious will be oil and gas and marine steel, and the construction, for obvious reason that a lot of our workers can't get out there to work for quite a while. Travel, as what Shekhar has mentioned, ticketing agents. So I think for me, the immediate impact will be felt by this industry, especially the S of the SMEs. For longer term, like what Shekhar has mentioned, I do agree that travel, I think it will take some time for this to come back. Even after everything is over, people will be skeptical to travel for a while. And also, I guess a lot of business travel with this period, they have moved on to alternative avenue to home meetings. So a lot of companies may cut back on that as well.
Right. In terms of the SMEs that I feel are most impacted, beyond your F&B businesses, which basically are the essentials, there are a lot of other businesses we don't get to see because they're not even allowed to operate at all. So these companies, in the clothing, retails, they do have to find an alternative means to do their business if they are not even allowed to be opening their retail. So I would think that F&B companies right now, because they're still essential, they do have an opportunity to consider how they want to run their business still. But for a large part of the businesses, they are all part of a bigger ecosystem. So bigger companies that rely on the smaller SMEs to support them, including F&B businesses or food court operators, they'll be concerned as well to the survival of the smaller companies. At the same time, the companies in manufacturing, they will rely on what's happening up front, downstream. So basically, this is a climate where it doesn't affect a certain industry, in my opinion. It affects a majority of the industry across globally as well as across industries. So in the initial business sense that was affected when countries such as China closed, companies that are reliant on their internal or external businesses in China are greatly affected, especially if 80% of their growth and business operations are there. But now, as well as Singapore being impacted, the local businesses now start to feel the heat as well. So it's something I would say affects SMEs, small and large, in different ways and in different magnitudes as well. But at the same time, speaking to several business owners as well, there are a few of them who do see their business impacted in different ways. They had to learn how to mobilize their businesses, and there were also opportunities that presented themselves during this period. So I kind of put the current state of businesses today in a simple framework of what I call the pause, stop, and play. There are businesses in play who are still figuring out how to cope with the volume of the disruption in the chains, and there are businesses who are temporarily paused, if anything, because they do have to realign their current resources to what is currently working for them. And for those that are stopped, a large of them would be very much affected, would be what I call experience-based businesses like your travel business industries. But I do foresee an opportunity for pent-up demand that might come. So, and I think that could be an area that we could look at on how we can manage these opportunities that do present itself later when certain things are lifted. Yeah.
I would share my observations across three main verticals, namely travel, retail, and F&B. With respect to travel, what we see, and I mean across different markets as well, whereby the lockdowns are not as severe in countries like Taiwan and Australia, we actually do see some domestic travel still happening, or rather that's the first sector to rebound. Similarly for Singapore, before the circuit breaker was implemented, actually one such term that we saw that was getting traction was staycations. Right, so similarly as the circuit breaker ends, I think one area that would be of interest for customers would be to look at staycations after being cooped up at home for long periods of time. I think domestic travel, where that market is big for countries, is relevant, but I think international travel will definitely be different going forward. And I think we are seeing a lot of layoffs from global MNCs on that front as well. I think in terms of retail, what we are seeing, clearly the e-commerces such as Lazada and Shopee are getting surges of orders. I think for RedMart, especially in terms of groceries, we're seeing very strong demand there. But I think for a lot of businesses, SMEs or mom and pop stores are also taking the opportunity on how they can get online presence better. I'm seeing a lot of hawker centers and hawker stores actually setting up Instagram accounts and getting onto digital platforms to advertise their business. I'm seeing a lot of SMEs also accelerating growth in their delivery stores, right? So in terms of reliance of how they are getting businesses, this is relevant for both F&B and retail. There tends to be previously very high recurring costs with respect to rental leases. However, I'm seeing a change in mindset a little bit on how that cost should be allocated. If the location, if it's not bringing in tons of walk-in traffic and there is a lot more reliance on delivery, then companies are rethinking about how they're thinking about cost allocation in terms of rental versus delivery as well. So I'm seeing quite a bit of that movement, namely in Australia, seeing actually a lot of offline malls such as Mayer or alcohol companies doing pretty good sales online and partnering with different advertising firms to try to drive those volumes. So I'm seeing quite successful pivots with respect to offline to online for some of the countries as well. Now, for Singapore, definitely seeing a lot more traction in terms of online groceries aside from the traditional e-commerces. And I think that's happening because with respect to the current situation, and we also have no idea how long exactly this will last, I think it is encouraging that a lot of businesses are also taking this opportunity to ramp up their digital efforts to be able to have additional revenue streams more meaningfully post the crisis. To what Juliana also mentioned in terms of a framework, one framework that we use internally and also in observation of other companies as well, we have a framework called Survive, Revive, and Thrive, right? So what do we need to do now in terms of management of cash flow to survive this crisis? What do we need to do when the opportunity presents itself to revive the business? And beyond that, what capabilities or enhancements that we need to build for our business such that beyond this, the company will continue to thrive. So I think it's encouraging that different companies are onboarding on these type of discussions or conversations to think about what are some of the capabilities they need to build that actually will have long-lasting impact that will add value to the business in the long future. Thank you.
Thanks, Candice, Juliana, Daniel, and Shekhar. What we are drawing from this conversation is all about two main drivers that will determine the shape of recovery curve that we'll have, whether it's V, U, or L shape. One of the drivers being how consumer demand comes through. What aspects of the pent-up demand that Juliana mentioned looks into it and comes back as something that people want to come back with a vengeance. We have divided opinions there in terms of the wider conversations that are happening in general. And one of the opinion is that everything will change in consumer behavior. Consumers are having this time to think about their priorities and everything will change. While the other tent is all about nothing changes. Consumers are lazy and consumers would go back to what they want to do because that's our normal, not this one. So we don't know. There is also various shades of gray here and also the pent-up demand in which sector that will drive the return back to normalcy. The second driver which we are seeing as part of this conversation is also about adapting and responding. So how SMEs, looking at both the frameworks that Candice and Juliana shared, that how various SMEs are looking to pivot from here. Digital transformation is happening because of the externalities rather than coming it internally. But a lot of SMEs are successfully moving and pivoting into digital transformation and how they can bring their goods if they're consumer facing online. Let's go deeper into this conversation as we have looked into an overview. And let's go to the second part of this webinar, which is all about we hear from the SMEs on what they have been talking about on social and looking at the search data on what they have been looking up. And then let's react to what we have been talking about. All right, so first let's get into the methodology before we share the insights with you, and we'll get opinions of the panelists. So the methodology was we looked into social media channels, conversations over there. We crawled about 7,000 plus social media channels. So all your Facebook public pages, whole of Twitter, forums, alternate media, etc. The data was from when things started to get picked up in Singapore after the first few cases of COVID. So from 1st of February all the way to 12th of April, and we validated it via search data. Then the consumer insights and trends were picked up from the SME conversations. And let's look at how we can adapt and respond with views of the panelists. So I'll share with you trends and let's react to those trends. So what we started seeing as part of the three-phased budgets that were rolled out, that a lot of SMEs were looking up, and this is from Google Trends, job support schemes, because they were thinking about not to retrench because cost of hiring again and building capability may be quite high, especially if you are in one of those specialized areas. Also property tax rebates, short terms around rentals, as well as the enterprise finance scheme. Now, this is something people are looking up for, but what are people talking about? The first trend that we saw here, and this was really interesting, we saw that coming in also from the large enterprises, that as firms started to go bankrupt, a lot of conversations were all about that. What about the cash flows that they have, or what about the reserves that they have in the past? And some SME owners were perceived as entitled on social media. Now, these are some of the word clouds that we picked these trends as we went into a deeper qualitative analysis. Now, this has gotten a good amount of engagement from social media in terms of having 2,000 odd comments around this trend. And what we are seeing is some SME owners are being perceived as entitled. They are not looking to hustle. They are not looking to come back to track, but they're actually seeming to cry. That's a perception on social media. What do our panelists think about entitlement?
I think it's a fact that some SMEs are expecting help from government all the time. But I think in general, why we are seeing more of such comments is because of the emergence of social media. I think that has always been around all these years. To balance it out, I think the SMEs are indeed in this era, like we have mentioned, they've been through so many crises in the last 20 years than the decades before. Since the 98 financial crisis, and after that you have the .com, you have the SARS, the 2008, and now. I think, but generally, I feel government has really done a lot recently, especially a lot of schemes available to help the SMEs in terms of grants. On the other hand, there are loans, and also they're opening up the loan scheme to the younger enterprise and all that. I think the comments come from the fact that Singapore started refocus on MNCs, and subsequently they have shifted a bit of focus to encouraging SME and the entrepreneurship among Singaporeans. So I guess we are looking at a very new batch of SME owners whom are more vocal. So hence that's why we are looking at all these comments that are coming up. Yeah.
And yeah, social media is a place where you would see both positives and negatives, right? So this trend is more moving towards negative as you rightly mentioned, and balancing it out with the positive. Open it up to the other panelists as well.
Yeah, I mean, see, you need to put things in perspective here. I mean, 3.5 million people, residents or citizens and PRs in Singapore, almost 70% of them work for SMEs. Not only that, 80% of the enterprises in Singapore are actually SMEs. So the group of people you've identified in your social media trend who are complaining about not being taken care of is actually the minority. Government is actually taking care of the majority, which is the working class people. Now, the idea here is this could be different from case to case basis. This could be a new startup or an entrepreneur who's been very successful but not been good in managing his own finances. So there could be shades of gray here, but the idea here is the measures that have been taken by the government is to ensure businesses sustain and not business owners sustain. There is a slight difference between the two. You want businesses to sustain, thrive, and grow. It doesn't matter who's running it. You would rather have a professional management run it with more people employment being generated than a single SME owner coming out feeling the sense of entitlement that I hire 150 odd employees and they have been taken care of. What about me? Well, the fact that when you become an entrepreneur, you are looking after the wider purpose, which is the employment, job growth, and business growth, which eventually flows back into you. So I don't completely agree or disagree on the points that you've highlighted. It's not absolutely negative. There could be some startups who are really struggling here. There could be some SME bosses who haven't really got their foot down and tried to build a business. They were in early stages and they were just caught in this COVID-19 outbreak surprise. And there could be some self-entitled people. I mean, there's always shades of gray in terms of how people react. But the idea here is government is taking care of the majority, which is the business and the people. Business owners can actually take care of themselves.
I do. Sorry,
please,
go ahead.
Joanna. No, please.
Sorry. All right, sure. I do find that any bosses, no matter how small or big an organization, are feeling the current burden that they do have. How much reserves each of them have to last and how long. I think at the back of most people's mind is how long will this situation last, right? And there's of course a majority of SMEs who are still what I call being entrepreneurial, being resilient and trying their best. That didn't exactly voice out perhaps some of these concerns that they do have, and they're probably more in the right space to ask, but not. So I think it could also be misdirected in the sense that those that are seen to be entitled and they were thinking of voicing out for others are seen in not a so positive light, because the rest that they don't see making such noise with anything or needs was obvious enough. So I do think that this entitlement and how much people they hire more or less are all real concerns of any business person. So how much each of them are entitled to, how much help, I think that is very subjective as well, and different shades. But I do think that how the social media is reacting, I would think that actually there are also a group of people whom you may also view as successful, who actually have come together among themselves, restaurant business owners who came together to set up delivery options for their customers, rather than about just asking help from the government. So I think it's about everybody needing that help, but how you ask for it or how you go about it, that was, I felt that was the flag that was that ended up for some of them who voiced it on the social media. So the way it was directed or the way it was being presented versus helping themselves or going out to the community and collaborating, I think those are things that we started to see happening among many SME owners, restaurant businesses, as well as other even smaller hawkers and even people who are not in F&B stepping up to help. So I think it's about that, what are you doing for yourselves and your company, and how are you collaborating? And yes, you could do with more help, but versus just about renting. So I think it's just, I suppose, misdirected in some ways, their own frustrations as an owner, and it didn't help that, later on packages do come for them to help more. So I think in some ways it started the ball rolling for a discussion of how much help should be given and is it enough. So I would think that in some ways it does help to have a conversation, even though it was in a very negative light on how it started. Yeah.
If I'll just add on with respect to social media, it being a platform and really powered by the comments and interactions of individuals on this platform, it will be also important to take a pinch of salt for the comments, right? I think for a lot of different events that happen on social media, people that comment might not be living through it. And I think it's always important to be curious on why certain things might happen as well. I'm sure a lot of SME business owners, managers, bosses are feeling a lot of pressure in terms of maintaining their livelihoods and feel a strong responsibility in this time and period and how they're able to provide for their employees as well. So I can imagine why a lot of businesses or a lot of owners are actually reaching out on different ways to ask for what might be perceived as handouts. I think that's reacting to possible fears as well as reacting to possible needs that they are trying to serve their businesses. I think on the other front, I think handouts or packages from governments will only get businesses so far, and it'll be important to understand, how do we extend cash flow? How do we extend runways so that we are able to, pivot businesses or establish new forms of revenue? And I think it's challenging in itself. I think in terms of social media as well, with the context of Singapore, I think what was also pretty nice or pretty encouraging is that there are also a lot of social initiatives that it came about in terms of building awareness for different F&B outlets or different businesses. And I think social media is a force that I think we can use for good as well, and to bring awareness and to bring benefits for everybody else or for businesses at this very difficult time. So while I think there will be always positive and negative comments, I think what we should also try to be curious about would be why some of these individuals are having or going through very difficult times and what can be done about it, right? And I think for all businesses owners, especially where responsibilities are high for livelihoods of individuals, the stress levels are incredibly high. And I would definitely ask that for us to be more empathetic and kinder to each other during this very difficult time.
Thank you, panelists, and really good responses coming in terms of the balanced nature. So from negative, let's move on to the second trend. And this is all about thankful conversations. And as you would see that the engagement on this trend is much larger than what we saw in the previous trend. And this is all about the SME owners, and this might be because of the stimulus package. They are feeling thankful that they could have been in a worse situation than they currently are. And some of these flavors came in from sectors that are not as badly impacted negatively. But one of the tweets that went viral, which was all about that, look, you're not a travel startup, you are actually doing better. Let's be grateful about what we have. Or saying that, look, my current issues are not about putting food at the table. I have to look at the future of my business and also the people that I employ, but at least my daily issues are being sorted out. So thankful conversations that trended on social. Again, love to know your views in terms of how do you see these two sitting together? Anyone can go ahead, guys. You don't have to wait for it.
Well, good to be thankful, no doubt about it. But the idea here is you can be thankful that you're not in a worse situation, or you could be thankful that there's help coming your way. And then you need to think about the next steps, what you're going to do about it. So yes, things are going to get difficult. Things are difficult, probably worse for those in retail, F&B, travel, tourism, transport. If you're not worse off, how are you helping the others? If you are better off, then definitely there's something extra that you could have done to assist those businesses. Probably a good opportunity to also see whether there is scope for collaboration. The opportunity for people like Candice and Juliana to come up and work together is something that's worth considering, and not just because there's one business that's very badly impacted and the other one is not. There could be two businesses who are equally worse off, but together they may have synergies to come together. There could be reasons people could be thankful for, because this is an eye-opener. This could be an opportunity to tell you that you were in a wrong business or you were heading the wrong direction. There are trends underlying trends that were changing, but you were not able to spot it. COVID-19 has just accelerated the trend change and you need to act now. So yeah, there is reasons to be thankful for, and definitely this will be taken in a positive stance by those entrepreneurs or bosses who are willing to change and adapt.
If I could add to that, I've had conversations with business owners. Some of them are personal friends and some of them were previous vendors. There were two groups of people who were thankful, even though they were in a worse state. Partly because they felt that they kind of thankful for what I call the pause, because they were so busy and lean firefighting their current businesses that this pause allowed them an opportunity to redirect and have a conversation about the where the business is heading, the strategy which Shekhar shared. Are we in the right space as well? Or are we going to be exposed each time something like this happens? So and why they were thankful is because they do have other areas of their businesses that could continue, and they could still work from home from that effect, and they are actually preparing to do this area of business well. And at the same time, as what Shekhar shared, some of the people who are thankful is because they still do have some help. They are aware of where this could run to, and they know that they have at least a good 6 months of reserves, and they are thankful that their staff are rallying behind them. And even though they try to not have any cuts while they take their own pay cuts, I think that gratefulness also flows through all the way down to the employees. And I think in such situations, it's helpful because the owners are also utilizing the staff to the right effect, in the sense that they are now coming together to see how they can improve their own performance as an organization, right? And yet at the same time, I have a friend who's a business owner who would you consider doing pretty well previously, having businesses in China, in Bangkok, and based there, not getting that kind of help. Has 80 to 90 staff in each country, and are tearful because she was feeling so pressurized of perhaps not being able to hold so long if this continues, right? Because she's dependent on businesses that requires experience, like hotels and travel. So I think, but yet she was still grateful because with the current workforce, she could still think about the next thing she needs to do. She still have enough reserve to consider that with all that pressure. So I think whichever level of impact they had been in, they make full use of the opportunity that they now have, whether they were forced to stop or whether they're in the current pause, to do better. And for those that, which Candice and some of them mentioned about collaboration, I have a small mini mart downstairs. And during this period, they actually perform better. They play better in their area. They have been online. They have upgraded their website. They collaborated with restaurants that were struggling to consolidate order without delivery fees. As a consumer, I felt that, and when I shared and asked, and they basically felt that they felt they could be answering a demand. At the same time, they felt they could be sharing an opportunity with another struggling business that they could assist. So these thankful conversations, I feel, and what Candice mentioned about being kinder to others are very helpful, both from employees, from a business owner point of view, as well as our fellow SMEs, right? Because this empathy that you have for one another allows us perhaps to do better during this period. And because of this ideation that you guys have and taking the opportunity to pause or collaborate and expand your network as a result, you might be surprised at the kind of opportunities that exist. And we can just see this from the bubble tea saga, right? Whereby it stopped, and then how Koi actually partnered with Grain. Grain is mainly online and one was mainly retail, and the Central Kitchen managed to come together to collaborate. So I'm just saying that that this kind of positive thinking and being grateful among the SME owners, and what I felt, this kind of positivity would lend greater help to each one of them, more than anything else. And this is the time for the entrepreneurial spirit that they do have in starting their business to come back on again. And this is essentially the essence of SMEs, right? They struggle with and without COVID. With and without COVID, there could be other circumstances, technological disruptions that happen, and now they could be using this opportunity to recalibrate their businesses again. And that's what I felt. Yeah.
To add on to that, I think when I notice in the organization if there are negative conversations spiraling, one thing that I would do is to actually ask the team what are they grateful for or what are they thankful for, just to give a bit more perspective, because things sometimes are not as bad as they imagine, right? There was someone in my team actually whose elderly father actually was contracted with COVID. And I think that added a lot of perspective to how important family was, as well as what priorities are, as well in what's important and what is difficult during this very trying time. I think in terms of SME owners or startups or companies coming together, I think that's also important in terms of driving force for good, using social media for better outcomes. One thing that ShopBack was doing in terms of partnering with other Singapore-born startups, I think primarily led by Ninja Van, is this campaign called Pace It Forward. And in this initiative, what we are doing is to get donations to purchase, I guess, care packages for needy families as well. Actually, we are partnering as well with RHB to contribute care packs too in this initiative, right? But I think during this time, it's also important to have perspective that there are a lot of people that are less fortunate than us, and how can we better help during this time. And I definitely do see a lot of conversations across the board, SME owners, students, professionals, on how we can get more cohesive as a society and stronger out of this. I think this is very important because tough times, I believe, will pass. And what do we want to be proud of, and how we acted during this time is actually going to matter post everything.
For myself, I think in general, why SME owners are thankful, because they do recognize that this is an unprecedented budget deficit that government has put in place, and very holistic in terms of loans, increasing the guarantee, and also they have also introduced temporary bills to delay contractual obligation, and also halting court proceedings for secured debts and all that. And at the same time, I think more importantly, they are thankful because this crisis is not just an economic crisis, it's actually sparked off from the health. And also, if they don't do that, they know that at first everyone is affected, and the circuit breaker is essential so that everyone is safe and their family is safe and all that. So I guess they are thankful that the government is doing their part, and also the workers, I think so far they understand everyone is affected. So in general, I think SME is feeling that way.
Thank you, Daniel. Thanks, analyst, for your views. Yes, it looks like there are sort of three perspectives, if I may sum up your responses on being thankful. One is to look in your personal life on whether you know someone who has been affected, and how thankful we can be as small and medium enterprises. The second one is to look at how other SMEs are doing and how government is providing stimulus packages for them to bring this together and move on. And the third one is more around taking a step back at your own business and see how this provides a pivot to you, for you to blossom and go in a different direction altogether. We have two more trends, but we have many questions coming from the audiences. So I'll quickly go into the two trends and we go into questions. So the third trend is all about SMEs being helpless. And here they are looking for more around information and how they can manage their cash flow, as well as look into various sort of loans and various sort of instruments out there which can help them not just to go through these times, but also to multiply their savings in these times so that they can last longer. The final trend was all about conversations regarding the budget. Again, relating back to the interest rate and how SMEs can mitigate risk. And this is all about the uncertainty that we don't know how long the virus will last, because we don't have a timeline exactly around the vaccine. It's being said all the way from 12 months to 24 months, and that's the only solution as we can go back to a real normal life. So SMEs are thinking about the loans and the associated risk with it, and they are looking to hedge their bets in terms of how much loan do I have to take at what interest for me to protect myself in these times. So let's react to it, and then we go into the audience Q&A. Panelists, you can go ahead.
Okay, for the loan part, I think talking about interest rate, government has actually simplified a lot of things since last year. They have actually consolidated the loans under the EFS scheme, Enterprise Singapore side. So interest rate wise, I think previously they are concerned that it's still very high. But I think government has announced and is already in place that they have provided, MES has provided a low-cost funding to the participation financial institution to tap on this to grant the ES loan. They started only this week. So I can safely say that the interest rate of this loan, which actually is essentially unsecured, is going to come down, and it's going to be quite low. In fact, I mean, I can't say I can't say a rate that will be applicable by all the banks, but I believe it will come down to a range of as low as secured loan, like a car loan. So I think SMEs who are in financial difficulty now should really tap on this by reaching out to the banks. I guess all of us among the PFIs are trying our best, even though, yes, currently, because even being in essential services, we are also having a very high percentage of our staff working from home, but we are still trying our best to process this loan request. I can say that as a general guideline, I'm seeing, for my segment at least, over the last 1 month, the request for loan has increased more than 3 times. So I think because it's widely publicized, SMEs are aware, they are tapping on it when required. So I think for the interest rate, to be fair, this time round is going to be really low. Yeah.
I think just again putting things in perspective, your social media survey was slightly backdated. It was back in February till April, while the budget announcements only came in March and later part of April. So the idea here is I've interacted with SMEs over the last 2 years through various foundations like SMF and SG Tech, and I've started to realize that most SME owners are aging entrepreneurs, struggling to reach out to the right source. Sometimes the information is hidden in the fine print, but the government is doing a fantastic job by trying to engage people and institutions and government bodies as well as industry bodies to come out and educate entrepreneurs. I guess the more the education, the better the information and less the feeling of helplessness. This is a gradual process. Obviously, when you have a sharp cut, you obviously start getting worried about the bleeding. But the idea here is there is help around the corner. It takes time, and eventually it will come through. Government measures have been pretty solid. As Daniel mentioned, if we are getting as close to lowest interest rates as possible. The question here is how you put it to use. The idea here is with that loans, how long can you stretch the cash flows? How long can you survive and build visibility on your business? So initially the question, the previous few discussion points, we discussed that whether you really need to be in the business. That was the first question. But if you are sure you need to be in the business, you need to grow and you need to survive, then how you best use this cash flow or the loans that you're getting from the government or from the banks. The idea here is this is still a loan. You need to realize you need to repay it back at some point in time. So there is a bigger question on sustainability of the business over a longer term horizon. You can run your stress test for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months and try to figure out which is the best fit. And then based on that, you can do financial analysis and figure out what loan works the best for your kind of business. what is the biggest risk you have for your sector? Is your sector going to be rebounding in 18 months? Then you need to think longer term, look for lower interest rates. If you think your business is going to rebound in 3 months when the lockdown is lifted or the circuit breaker is lifted, then the assessment is slightly different. So yes, this feeling of helplessness was there. I guess it will gradually disappear. And on the management of risk, it is all internal. The banks can't manage a risk for you. Banks are there to lend money, and they will do it to the best of their abilities. But internal assessment of your business, figuring out where your business risks are and how you're going to repay the loan is what the business owners or the SME bosses have to sit upon.
Absolutely, Shekhar. And perhaps what we are seeing in the recent conversations is all about that how do they mitigate these risks and the runway that you talked about, which goes back to how are they adapting and responding in these times. Let's go to audience Q&A now. We have about 7 questions. So I'll summarize a few questions which are quite similar with each other. So the first question is more general in nature. It's all about how did consumer behavior shift from Jan to April so far? Now, obviously, consumer behavior means you are talking about various sectors and behavior in those. So perhaps you can talk about our sectors and what's the movement that you are seeing.
Maybe I can jump into for this one. So I think in terms of, let's say, January to April, one of the clear movements we are seeing is that travel and experiences have clearly declined substantially, right? And across all countries, whereby there are different cities and states, it has moved from international to domestic travel. That's one big trend. I think with respect to Singapore specifically, we're seeing a much bigger focus on vitamins, healthcare, as well as groceries. As the circuit breaker was implemented as well, increased behavior on perhaps working from home, such as furniture, right? I think when right before the circuit breaker happened, we saw long lines outside IKEA. But similarly, we're seeing more people buy furniture online. And also, I guess, facilities that would enable for better work from home, such as Nespresso machines. So we're seeing these purchasing behaviors that enable a situation for more prolonged work from home setups, as well as a greater, I guess, emphasis towards healthcare. Healthcare here will include vitamins and vitamins, but also fitness equipment for working from home. So at least that's how I see from the online space.
Yes, there's definitely more traction in the B2C aspects of it. What about Juliana, Shekhar, and Daniel?
Well, I do see a definite shift. If anything, the current situation has transformed most business in a faster acceleration stage. While people last time were doing more of a strategy, now it's really more of a need. So, but the great news is that for people who are trying to go online or trying to tap technology, that this is the right opportunity, I guess, to see how consumers are also being forced online and how you can then respond accordingly to the business portfolio that you have. So for example, even in the F&B, right? Previously, for those of them who do go on board online, now you also have more competitors who are on board. Meaning all the other F&B companies are also online. So there's going to be a greater need for you to stand out, reinvent your menu so that people are not tired of it. And at the same time, you also have opportunities now and more applications, mobile apps and all that. It's a greater need for them to understand how to shift their business. And I do think that this is going to stay. For those who have been forced online, it's an opportunity for them to see how does this contribute to their business. For those that are currently already been online, is to do better in it, because they probably have what I call greater savviness in terms of marketing their businesses online. And I don't think it's just the F&B. Almost every business right now is looking to the omni-channel that used to be just they were probably too busy to look at. And in terms of the loans that's been provided as well, I would think that as they strategize their next move, whether they want to start a new one versus what they're doing now, and to use this downtime to innovate, right, and transform their current digitalization of their business when it's down, do consider the enterprise grants that the government provides. They have productivity grants, they have grants that helps you with your innovation and transformation of your business's operations. They have grants that help you look at improving your brand and design, and how you want to market both locally and overseas. And we're always looking at Singapore, but there are also companies that are based in Singapore that serve a global market, right? So make full use of these opportunities that now present itself, and where the government is being a little bit more generous in terms of the support. So couple it with the loans to help you trigger your next move as a business. So I find that when you combine that with what Shekhar mentioned, know your runway, know what you need to move, and use that loan as well as the grants that you can get, and couple that with how you want to see yourself move the business, even during these times. I mean, we can't say that we wait for it to open, but during this period, how much can you do for your business, and how much current resources to be redeployed or reviewed? I think that's going to be very essential on the sustainability portion, if this was to continue, and how you can continue to innovate and shift your business so that you can gain the next energy for when things are normalizing again.
So
okay. A good sense on the consumer trend. There is some dated information from SingStat. I remember the overall online sales for Singapore in the month of February was only 7%. But, it's a misnomer. The underlying consumer trend or changes in behavior was already happening over the last few years. So to put things in perspective, supermarkets or hypermarkets only accounted 8% of the total sales was coming from online. 30% of your telecom hardware or phones that you were buying was online. 14% of the furniture was online, and F&B was only 12.5%. Roll forward 3 months, and I can tell you this number would have spiraled up. As Candice mentioned, I mean, this is happening globally. We probably don't have the data points right now for Singapore, but as the subsequent data point comes through, the consumer shift here is you will be buying more online. So we were arguing these points earlier that Singapore is an aging economy. The demographics don't support people transitioning into online purchasing. But this COVID-19 outbreak has actually forced people to go online. The younger generation has already made the switch. They are already quite tech savvy. They try to figure out best deals available. But the older generation, even for the basic necessities, are starting to go online. And this is probably a very common phenomenon we can observe because it affects on a day-to-day life. But there will be other changes in consumer behavior that will happen over the next 6 to 9 months across various sectors. F&B and probably hypermarket, supermarket shopping is probably easiest to assess, but the other trends will also come through.
For me, I think from banking side, we do see also an increase over the last quarter that people are taking up internet banking service for the SMEs, and I think some of the trend will be here to stay actually, online banking and also the dining habits. I'm sure after you are hooked on to using the Grab and Deliveroo, likely some of the consumer will be dining out lesser, and also more attention is being paid on purchasing the hygiene product, like what the rest of the panelists are saying. Yep.
Thanks, Daniel. And it's a nice segue into our last question. We are in the last 3 minutes now. So which industries do you think, because of this digital transformation that's happening, or post-transformation that's happening, may start to phase out, given that a lot of people are actually going online? So because of the shifting consumer behavior towards online, which sectors do you think may actually be left irrelevant? It's a tough one. So it's just your thoughts, guys. It's more about that we are trying to be as honest to our audience questions. And obviously it doesn't mean that whatever you predict, you'll be held against it. SMEs want to know, because there's a lot of nervousness around irrelevancy later on. So it's more about how do we see it?
Let me start with this. So again, I don't think there is going to be a transformational change, or these are changes we have not envisaged before. These are changes that were ongoing for quite some time, just that the whole change will be speeded up and we'll probably see it getting implemented over a shorter time period. Daniel mentioned banking system, online transaction, the recent data points for Pay Now, for business users has shot up. So people are doing more transactions online. A good example would be less number of branches, less number of touch points for consumers on the banking side, more consumption of data. So you'll probably see media houses struggling because now everything is accessible on your phone. Zoom calls are done on your phone. You don't really need a physical laptop and walk around with it. You would probably see changes that consumer part we've already discussed. Moving to an online platform will be quite obvious. You'll probably see a switch in technology. The idea here is once 5G comes through over the next 12 to 18 months, and it will come, there's no escaping it. There are a lot of changes that were already discussed about will happen. You will see more and more people getting comfortable with doing things remotely. Work from home could be a new norm. We haven't seen data points for Singapore yet, but I was reading across newspapers in the world and I noticed something in India. IT sector is quite big in India, and TCS, which is one of the leading employers of IT in the country, they're going to move away from current work from home for 25% of the workforce to 75% of the workforce over the next 3 years, which means almost 3/4 of 450,000 people that work for them are not going to visit any offices. You'll probably see a slump in demand for commercial real estate. You'll probably see a slump in demand for retail real estate. Now, I'm not saying these are going to go away. We're probably not going to live a world with no shopping malls or offices. They are going to exist. The question here is how many of the incremental changes will be positive or the incremental changes will be negative. There will be some sectors where growth will probably stagnate and there'll be no change whatsoever. It is what it is. What we see here will exist as it has always existed. There'll be some sectors where there'll be a transformational change. Consumer behavior would be switching towards online, and those sectors will be the ones which will flourish. Now, hard to pin down exact companies and sectors, but the underlying trend has been there for quite some time. You just need to spot those trends and run with it.
I will echo Shekhar's view. I think it's not so, I wouldn't say so much on some industry or sector will get eliminated totally. I think it's more of the transformation in their business model. If you ask me, then I think it's like, I give an example of a SME neighborhood selling essential hygiene facial product. You have a lot of the neighborhood seniors buying and all that, but now because they are forced online, eventually they may get used to it. So for such company at the neighborhood, they may have to adopt a more online strategy than waiting for the captive environment to come down to their shop and do their purchases day to day. So stuff like that, more on changing their business model, re-examine their cost structure and also the workflow than being eliminated totally.
Yeah, if I could add just one sector, sorry, Juliana, just one sector where I think is going to impact every one of our lives is education. We are used to going to schools, colleges, and institutes to get our education. This may be a very big change coming through. Online education may become a norm, probably a better recognition for online degrees. You could now get a Harvard degree while sitting at your home and listening to the same professors, which you could have heard if you were in Harvard. Now that change is going to happen. So education is one place where I think educational institutes will have to transform their business models, revisit their cost structure. You pay through your nose to get into Harvard because you are in Harvard. You don't need to be in US anymore to get the same degrees. And that is the kind of change we are looking at. And that is the kind of change you need to identify.
Yeah, I totally echo that. I don't think a particular industry will particularly go out. It's just going to be reinvented in the way they operate and reach their consumers. So I would think that the businesses that's going to stay relevant and agile will be the ones that is going to come out of this, if not stronger. But however, the companies that continue to, even before COVID situation, that continue to face difficulties would be like your clothing companies, right? They've been closing down one by one. As well as some of your personal care, etc. So it's really, whether it's COVID or whether it's another situation, trends and consumer businesses are being disrupted by technology or just about being relevant that's going to continue to happen. And as what Shekhar mentioned, it's about spotting the trends. But really right now is being accelerated, and there is an opportunity for those that have that downtime to re-strategize and then make full use of that. So being agile, whether you're small or you're large, is going to be key. But as I like to also share, businesses may have to change according to consumer habits. Within these few months of being confined at home, habits will get formed. As for what Daniel mentioned, there'll be people who get used to doing online deliveries. You're going to see more of that, and how you're going to continue to keep them loyal both online and offline. And at the same time, certain habits were going to be ceased to happen, right? Whether it's certain vices, or whether it's drinking, or certain new norms will take place. So I think what could be interesting in terms of research would be what new habits will be formed fundamentally during this period of 3 months, which is enough to form and break a habit, and what will not continue. So I think to identify that other consumer trend and being relevant in opportunities there will provide businesses when the environment play again and to do it well, I guess, in that instance. Yeah, so that's my view.
Thank you, Juliana. Candice, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I think with respect to your question head on as well, which industry will not last or will not adapt, or will need to be transformed. I think that is very relevant to human beings as a species. Darwin said that it's not the strongest or the most intelligent, but the most adaptable. I think that's true for businesses in general, and the norm as well as the environment year to year differs. I think with respect to changes in the wider environment, this is especially important for us to read the situation and understand what actions we need to take differently. Right? I also see a much stronger focus on value during this time. I am seeing this largely from my industry, because I think during this time, right, let's say advertising out of home or advertising online, generically, whereby there might be lower conversion rates or lower or depressed spending habits or higher cancellations and rejections. That has benefited ShopBack as a business as a whole, because it is about a pay per performance business, right? So I think in terms of advertising and marketing solutions, that will evolve drastically during this time as well. I'm closer to this environment, so that's something I would like to share. But I think in terms of how do we get the insight on what to share, what to transform and what to adapt, I was given this really good advice with respect to entrepreneurs or business owners, is to have expensive enough a network, people to tap on from different industries. It doesn't matter if you're a teacher, a priest, a doctor, but understanding what are the differences in behaviors, as Juliana mentioned, what are new habits formed, and be able to derive the insight. That might be very obvious maybe 1 year from now, right? But whoever is able to read the insight and then execute it, because an idea is just an idea, be able to execute it that really adds value to the community or add value to the wider environment. I think that's where businesses will actually will not just survive, but really, really thrive out of this. Because with respect to crisis, there will be new needs that will be extremely required. And I think I'll be very heartened to see new business and new business champions that emerge out of this pandemic as well.
Thank you, Candice. Shekhar, you had a last point to make?
Yeah, just one final point here. I mean, no matter how the transformation will look like, the idea here is there are institutions, government backing the entrepreneurs. Even in the recent budget announcements, there were SME Go Digital, market readiness assistance, and enterprise development grants being offered to SMEs who are willing to take up the challenge. I mean, the idea here is if you see an underlying trend and you see a change and you want to ride on it, you can definitely get the government assistance. You want to go global, you want to take this opportunity to take your business beyond Singapore because you think it's not growing, you don't have critical mass here, there's opportunities where government is assisting you. You think digital is a way to go, there are opportunities where you can tap onto the funding received from the government and go digital. There are private bodies like Google, Shopee, ShopBack, I'm sure there are others who are helping businesses out in trying to go digital. So there is ample of opportunities out there. You just need to spot the trend and be willing to ride on with it.
Thank you, panelists, and thanks for sharing your experiences, some data, some frameworks, as well as your thoughts and advice to our local SMEs. Thanks a lot, guys. 100+ participants joined in later. So thanks a lot for patiently hearing to us as we slightly overshot time. We really wish all the best to our SMEs as they adapt and respond to these times with a good, robust government package, as well as a healthy partnership and help from the private sector. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
everyone.
you.